Hello, everybody. Welcome to Starfleet Tactical. I am Chris Weave, and Pat, of course, is here, but Pat is going to be jerky because we think his son is upstairs stealing all the bandwidth. Because, and with me, we have my brother, Delon. Actually, I'm with him because I'm currently sitting at his place. I went to visit my family in Des Moines, and so I'm using up his bandwidth, so I said he could be on the show.
Welcome, Delon.
Hello.
So, Pat, how have you been? Do anything special this week?
Nope. I've just been doing my standard 3 major activities of working the full-time job, working the part-time job, and working on my deck. So that's pretty much takes up most of my time. Throw in some sleeping and eating, and you've got a day or 7 of them.
Yeah, I totally and completely understand how that goes. I totally and completely understand. So I've actually been here pretty much all week. I came in on Sunday and have been here ever since then, and I'm probably going to go back middle of next week. So, so I haven't really done a whole lot of work, although my ability to work has improved since Delon went over and fixed my dad's internet connectivity. There was a bad... What did it end up being?
I think the satellite router needed to be reset.
Okay.
The one closest to you was not communicating properly.
It's working great, by the way.
Thank you very much.
But it like I couldn't maintain connectivity. It kept dropping, and I'd have to reconnect, and so I could only work in like 2-minute bursts. So,
for those of you who don't know, I work in the IT industry, and I've been doing it for 30 years. So I do free tech support for both my family and my wife's family.
So basically you would have with 30 years experience, you'd have 0 chance of getting hired by the US government to fix their IT issues.
Probably not. Although I do work for the state of Iowa.
He works for the state of Iowa.
I work for one of the officials. So
yeah, well, let me know if you go to work for the Navy. I'm sure that would improve things tremendously.
Well, but we know what the problems are with the Navy. I mean, the problems are archaic infrastructure and bad policies. So it's not like the problems are unknown. You don't have to be Nostradamus.
Right, at this point in time, I should remind you about the disclaimer.
Oh yes. Delon's purpose is to remind me that. So I don't know. That hasn't changed for me, Pat. Are you speaking for your employer? I'm not speaking.
I am not speaking for any of my employers or my family or my house or anything else. Just me.
I usually try to remind Chris about the same time when he does say something like that about the Navy or something like that.
Nope, I appreciate it.
So yeah, so that works out pretty well. So let's see. We were talking earlier, Pat, about what we were going to talk about tonight, and you had a really good suggestion, and I especially liked the part where you did all the work. So what are we going to talk about today?
So today, I figured we would start looking since we're about Starship Combat. We'll take a look at NX-01 under Captain Archer, and how did they fare in the arena of Starship Combat. So we'll start at season 1 and look at a couple episodes and a couple of the battles. Now, they encountered lots of times where they ended up shooting their weapons, so I won't necessarily touch every time someone pressed a fire button. But where we have an interesting battle, or where it maybe has something interesting to it, we'll throw it in there, or if it reveals some interesting information. So,
before we start, I want to add one other thing that just occurred.
Please do.
And that is, so I have fallen off the cliff, and I haven't been doing what I did for the first 36 episodes, which was go through and put up comments, go through the chat, put up comments afterwards. That is not because I have stopped doing that. It's just I got really, really busy. And so I've been saving the chat and going back, and I still intend to do that. So I'm just a little behind. So I don't know if anybody but me cares, but if you do care, I think it's entirely possible. I'm actually the only one who cares about that, but I haven't really changed my policy. I just haven't gotten to it. It's been a very busy, very confusing, very distracting kind of week, so I still haven't done that. But
right.
So in any event, back to you, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to turn off my camera just because I think it's more distracting right now than anything, since apparently there are minor bandwidth issues here. So I'm going to share my screen.
I've got at least one person on chat telling me that they care. So
thank you, Rob.
Yeah. Tim and Bob both said that they care. So I will go back and do that.
Oh, actually, yes, there are lots of people who care. So good. Let's see here. All right. So this is me attempting to share my screen.
While you're doing that, I want to tell Jim, I barely sometimes speak for my own agency, let alone other ones.
You're not going to try to show clips, are you? Because we still haven't gotten episode 35 back.
No, there will be no clips. That's why I just take screen captures from what is that? What is that show? Or Trek Core. That's the one that I use. So. Okay, so there we go. Come on. All right. Okay.
So are you meaning to show us I think you're not showing us the one that you think you're showing us.
Oh, no, that's what I was just about to ask, if I was showing the thing that I thought I was showing.
Okay, so now that didn't actually fix it. It just removed it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's try this one more time. I'm going to stop screen, share. Because what would it be without technical glitches?
I'd be out of a job.
All right. There we go. See if it works this time. Am I now sharing the thing that I think I'm sharing?
Yes, you are.
All right.
I see the Enterprise crew.
Okay. So like I said, this one's just kind of a brief introduction. So we'll go through this. It's fairly light. The one thing about Enterprise is there generally are not like Balance of Terror episodes where, it's the entire episode dedicated to the captain's sitting on the bridge, giving orders and all that kind of stuff. So, a lot of the battles that seem to occur don't necessarily take up the whole episode. They're usually just small portions of it. But we get to learn a little bit about NX-01 and how they went, boldly charging into space, mostly unarmed and with lots of naive hopes that they would encounter lots of nice people. So that didn't pan out real well, but as far as that part went. So what we do see is Captain Archer, and the crew, after the Xindi crisis, they returned home to Earth, a very grateful Earth, to a hero's welcome. Basically, all of Earth was really grateful for Enterprise, essentially handling the Xindi threat. All over the globe, high schools are being named after Captain Archer. And he may even have surpassed Zephyrin Cochrane in the number of high schools named after him. So they're all a really big deal. I mean, Enterprise was the premier, the jewel of Starfleet, so to speak. So, but they didn't necessarily start off with that sort of glorious position, and it was kind of a rough beginning. But after they get home, he's on board. He goes over and tours Columbia, and takes a look at the upgrades on NXO-2, the Enterprise's sister ship that's being built. And as Enterprise is aboard Columbia, he and Captain Hernandez are, and that's her over here on the right side. They're discussing the upgrades to Columbia and the improvements they're making over NX-01. So, he has lots of helpful things to say, like, hey, you're going to be spending a lot of time in that chair. Maybe give it good lumbar support and stuff like that. But she starts talking about some of the improvements and stuff, and she says they've tied in the consoles and the panels to the bridge, consoles and panels on the bridge directly into the EPS conduits. So why is this important? Well, this ensures, of course, that you'd get climactic explosions and consoles blowing up, as fiercely as possible into the faces of the crew members. So Columbia's crew members are in some real trouble when they get into a battle. But
about the gravel installation.
They didn't mention gravel installation, but I can only assume that just comes standard.
Yeah, because there clearly must be great pots of gravel built into all that equipment to explain where all those rocks come from every time.
Yes, exactly.
Bridge, so.
Exactly. So anyways, Archer makes plans. He wants to make similar improvements to the Enterprise. Basically, he says, I hope you don't mind if I steal some of these improvements. Additionally, she mentions that there's going to be a 12% increase in the hull polarization, so they can hang in a firefight a little bit longer. Archer notices that they're getting both ventral and dorsal torpedo launchers, and their phase cannons are now pulsed phase cannons. Not sure exactly how that improves the, they don't give us any specifics basically on how that improves the armament, but presumably that's an upgrade as well. And most of these upgrades are upgrades that Archer had recommended. So, and Archer also tells the story about having an argument with Captain Jeffries, where Archer had said, hey, I don't want to command a warship while I'm trying to explore the galaxy. And Jeffries argued that they needed the weapons. And Archer concedes now in hindsight that Captain Jeffries was absolutely correct and that they really had needed those weapons early on.
Does Captain Jeffries have a first name?
It does not say the Captain Jeffries he was mentioning did not have a first name, but I suspect it would be Matt there. It's a reference to Matt Jeffries, who designed the Jeffries tubes in the original series.
That's what my guess would be too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I believe we call that an Easter egg, right? So anyways, and then she also asks for his recommendation on, senior officers and staff, and asks about she asks him about her tactical officer candidate. And Archer basically replies immediately, get someone with more experience. He recommends that they assign a squad of Makos to the Columbia. And then Captain Rodriguez says, yeah, I'm not sure I want military aboard the vessel, aboard Columbia. And basically Archer said, you're going to spend a lot of your time boldly going into battle. And she thinks he's being cynical. So, and of course, the Archer we see here at the beginning of season 4 is not the naive, overly friendly guy that we saw in season 1, because, well, he's gone through a whole bunch of stuff, particularly going through the Expanse and fighting the Xindi. He went through a lot of things and made a lot of tough decisions. So after some briefings and debriefings and such, Archer decides to just, and actually after he blows up at Ambassador Saval, he basically gets told to go take a vacation. So he decides to go hiking, and Captain Hernandez happens to follow him out there, and they end up going climbing together. So in his additional discussions with her, so Captain Archer, in talking to Captain Hernandez, Captain Archer says, I feel a lot like, or actually he says at one point, I wish you would just go away, because when I see you, it's like, seeing the younger version of myself, basically. So I suspect Archer feels an awful lot like he's talking to the younger, more naive version of himself as he talks to Captain Hernandez. Because basically, and this is also part of where he has some potential regrets and stuff. He points out, hey, there are 7 million dead from the Xindi attack. Maybe if we weren't out stirring trouble, those 7 million people would be alive. And she responds, of course, hey, you weren't out causing trouble. You were just exploring, right? But certainly some people on Earth do dislike the alien presence, and we see some of that. In those episodes coming up. And also Archer's very quick to point out, hey, the Vulcans don't go out exploring very often or very much. They keep the majority of their fleet at home where it can protect their solar system. Though they do, of course, have some colonies. They've done some exploring, but it's not their focus. And he senses that Captain Hernandez is thinking, yeah, you're being awfully cynical. You're sounding like an old man. But Archer's reply to that is, maybe you'll feel a little differently after you've delivered a few more eulogies. So he probably has some PTSD. We see him with some nightmares, and he has some regrets. Probably losing the naivete and enthusiasm that he had 3 years ago. So when he started all this. So. Going back, rewind back to the first season, back when he is young and naive, and they're early on in their mission, and they're all just excited to be there. So in the episode Fight or Flight, it's episode 2 of season 1. We see the Enterprise. And it kind of opens with Malcolm doing some simulated test firings of torpedoes as he's trying to get the targeting sensors aligned. Because if you recall, Enterprise left space dock pretty much without most of its weapons. I believe it only left space dock with one of its 3 phase cannons, and of course it had those crappy spatial torpedoes that they had, which are probably don't seem to be much more impressive than basic rockets. So Captain Archer agrees to go do a test of some of the torpedoes. So they go find some asteroids, and the first shot completely misses the asteroid, and the second shot bounces off an asteroid and turns around and comes at Enterprise, and they have to self-destruct it before it hits them. So, and that's not totally unrealistic thing. Chris, I don't know if it's still rumored or if they've proven that we lost some of our submarines in World War II from faulty torpedoes that came back at them.
They're pretty sure that we lost at least a couple from that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm generally not in favor of like drawing and quartering people on your own side. But with Bjord in World War II, I'd make an exception.
Yeah. So
those torpedoes had multiple faults.
Oh yeah, right. I mean, a lot of them were duds, right? There were a few times where somebody had gone through all the trouble of setting up a perfectly good shot, and then it just bounces off the Japanese hull and stuff, right?
They had exploders that didn't work if you hit directly on. Basically, the fuse would break before it could detonate the weapon. Mm-hmm. So you had that. You had problems with it depth running. At one point, they after all the complaints, Bjord sent a couple of people who were with the torpedo from the moment it was like they supervised it being loaded on the submarine and were with it until the moment it was fired, and it was a dud. And the report was, well, we don't know what they did wrong, but they had to have done something wrong.
Right, because it was perfect otherwise, right?
And then there was another instance where a captain like went out and tested some of his torpedoes by like shooting them at a cliff.
Uh-huh.
You can't really miss shooting at a cliff, right?
Right.
If they didn't detonate, and Bjord's response was to say, well, you shouldn't have tested them. We told you not to test them.
That sounds like a bureaucratic answer. All right.
Yeah. So, I mean, they literally, they should have cashiered the head of Bjord. They should have fired some people. They should have sent some people to jail.
Yes. I tend to agree. So
not,
go ahead.
The employer.
Also, yes, agreed.
It should be.
So then a little later on in the episode, they encounter a derelict ship, and as they go to investigate it, they realize, hey, it looks like it's a little bit damaged. So they go aboard the ship to take a look at it. And then it turns out that, and so they go aboard. There's a bunch of dead bodies. Everybody, it's like the bodies were being, I don't know if the right word would be mined, but they're clearly being attached to machines and stuff like that. So, but they're all dead. So a little while later, an alien ship arrives and attacks Enterprise. Now, of course, it's got to look like a bladed weapon. So it clearly does look like a fairly mean, unfriendly ship. It almost looks a little bit like a Breen ship, actually. But anyways, so alien ship arrives, it attacks Enterprise and disables Enterprise. So Enterprise fires off 2 of its spatial torpedoes, and the first one bounces off the alien shields. And then, as you can see right here, the alien phaser or disruptor shoots down the torpedo before it could score a hit. So Enterprise's counterattack is completely ineffective in real life. So basically, the first one just hit the shields here on the corner and just bounced off and fizzled out, and the second one got shot down. So then the alien ship comes along and catches the Enterprise in a tractor beam and is getting ready to start drilling holes into the Enterprise so that they can probably farm the crew. Of course, it scanned the crew and everything like that. And I think Phlox made the eerie comment that, okay, it now knows what compounds we're all made of and stuff like that. So, so we can only assume that the crew of the Enterprise is about to be harvested. So things are seeming pretty hopeless right now. But then we get a alien ship arrive, and it's unclear, but Hoshi, basically this alien ship arrives in the nick of time, and turns out they're the same species as the dead bodies on the derelict ship. So Hoshi basically saves the day, uses her translation skills, and she makes it really clear that the other guys, the other bad aliens, are the ones that killed their people, not the people on the Enterprise. There, of course, was a misunderstanding at first. So this ship opens fire against the alien ship and destroys it. So first it damages it. Enterprise is able to get out of the tractor beam and get away. And then it gets destroyed. And of course, Malcolm fires an aft spatial torpedo at the highly weakened, very weakened enemy ship. And they destroy it. So, I think it's like the alien race that showed up to help. And turns out, anyone recognize this race? Chris, anybody? You know what race this is?
They had a name that sounded vaguely familiar.
Yep.
It's right on the tip of my tongue. The Aries?
Close. Nope. So turns out these are the Axanar. So, and they came along and saved the Enterprise. So now this is a little bit like, now Malcolm firing that torpedo to me seems a little like, hey, the Axanar came along and chopped them in half, and Malcolm threw a pebble at it.
Well,
to help out.
Even when they're down.
He did fire the torpedo, but then the Axanar actually blew the ship up.
Yes, exactly. We're not even sure. I don't even completely remember if the torpedo had reached the bad guy ship yet before it exploded. Okay.
It clearly did some damage, but then the Axanar fired a shot, because then Archer said something about glad they let us get away from them first or before they fired.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
That battle has something interesting in it that I almost had me shouting at the screen.
All right.
And it wasn't anything to do with the starships firing on the starships, but they came to that point where it's like, okay, we're going to be boarded, and Archer tells Malcolm, get down to the armory, get all the personal weapons, start distributing them to the crew. We're clearly getting ready to stop a boarding action, and then something happened on the screen, and Malcolm just turns around and goes back to his chair. It's like, they're still in the process. They're still in a tractor beam, and they're dropping the connectors down, and their whole plating's off, etc., etc. They're still in the process of being boarded, and Hoshi's trying to communicate with this Axanar guy, and he's not buying it. And but he just turned around and went back. And Archer didn't say, "Remember that part where I gave you an order about could you go do that?
Could you go do that, maybe?" And
they just it's like somebody. It would have made more sense if Archer had been interrupted before giving the order, at the beginning of it, and he hadn't actually said, "Go do this."
Right.
Or he had said, "Belay my last." But as it was, Malcolm just turned around and did something else. And Archer went, okay.
All right. Well, fine.
Sure.
Well, one thing I've noticed, and for those, Chris knows this, but nobody else knows it. I'm a longtime Trek fan either, but quite frankly, I haven't invested nearly as much time as any of these other two guys. Okay? I'm just a long-term fan. But one thing that I've always seemed to notice is they always seem to say, go down and do this, instead of say, tell the people who are already there to go do this.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, if your defensive plan to stop enemy boarding attacks requires one person with the one key to the one locker to individually walk around the ship and hand out weapons, they're going to be on board your ship and have everybody before that happens. So,
well, there's a long tradition in Star Trek of things that are done for dramatic effect those ways. It's like, Geordi calls and says, "Captain, we got a problem." "What is it, Geordi?" "Trouble." Or, "You've got to come down and see this. You've got to come down and see this." Like, no, that's not how you give a report to your boss. It's not come down and see this.
When I tell my boss something like that, he always says, "What is it?" He doesn't want me to basically pull up something on the camera and say, "I want to show you this."
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Something else I want to throw in. These guys remind me of the Drazi.
Oh yeah,
they do kind of look like the Drazi.
Just a slightly different shade. I think the Drazi are more gray.
Yeah, their ship's not as cool as the Drazi ships, though.
No, the ship wasn't very cool at all.
No, it kind of looks like a freighter. But there's a picture of it as it's shooting, and then so this is the good guys shooting the bad guy aliens, and there's right here is the aft spatial torpedo that is Malcolm's parting shot. So, but after that, they have a nice peaceful encounter with the Axanar, and they all get to be best buddies at that point. So that was a fairly simple one. So I would say Enterprise didn't win this battle. Somebody just came along and saved them. So I would put this in the win-loss category. I would put this under a loss because they were losing until, the cavalry happened to show up in the nick of time. So, but it was one of the lessons that Archer took, it's one of the lessons that informed Archer's decisions in this next one. So the second battle is called Silent Enemy. Now, Enterprise is out dropping off subspace relays and, probably trying to improve the communications network and stuff like that in their area of space. And of course, lo and behold, another mysterious alien ship shows up. And so initially, Captain Archer's kind of happy, like, hey, there's another ship coming out. It's another prospect for a first encounter. Archer opens hailing frequencies. They're clearly unimpressed with Archer's attempt at small talk, and they just turn around and leave. So, but a short while later, they return, but this time they start shooting at Enterprise. So they get attacked. And then a little later on, they get attacked again. And that results in Archer. And each time Enterprise gets damaged and can't really adequately respond, and the other ship can just kind of come and go as it pleases. Now, we have no idea what the motivation of this particular alien ship is, where it's just sort of doing these little pinprick attacks and then, attack, leave kind of thing. So we don't know what their motivation is necessarily. So they clearly could just destroy Enterprise or do what they wanted with it. But that apparently toying with Enterprise seems to be more likely part of their plan. So as a result of this, this is the big thing here. Archer tells T'Pol, hey, Enterprise isn't equipped for the threats that we're coming up against. And since they left space dock without all their weapons, Archer basically decides to go back to Jupiter Station. Let's get the weapons installed, get the ship fixed up, and then we'll be better prepared to deal with the threats that we encounter out here. But Trip and Malcolm have entirely other ideas. They're kind of annoyed. They don't want to go back to Jupiter Station with the tail between their legs, and so they come up with a plan to make and design two more phase cannons for the Enterprise. So basically they gather all their armory and engineering staff together, give them a briefing on the phase cannons. And basically they said, hey, we're heading back to Jupiter. Let's all work double shifts and build our own phase cannons. And hopefully we can get this done about the same time we arrive at Jupiter Station, so that I think in the words of Trip was, so they don't have anything to do but give us a buff and a wax. And then they can turn around and come back. So, because Trip just doesn't seem to like the idea of a bunch of other strange engineers working on his ship. And then Malcolm, I kind of like Malcolm because he's the tactical guy. He's the guy enamored by all the cool military stuff. And he's given them the brief on the phase cannon. It's a modulated energy weapon. And to quote them, it's a maximum power output of 500 gigajoules. Enterprise was meant to carry 3 of them. 2 of them are forward and 1 are aft. And they left space dock, I believe, with only 1. So as they are heading back to Earth, they contemplate calling for some help from a Vulcan ship, but it turns out these aliens are also taking out the subspace relays, and so the communications just don't have the range to contact anybody at this point. So they get attacked again, and this time they're actually boarded by the aliens, and they end up attacking a couple crew members. They fire their phase pistols at these aliens and hit them squarely, but it has no effect on them, and they just kind of turn around and leave. So they get off the Enterprise, and their ship turns around and leaves again. So once again, we don't know anything about who these aliens are or what their motivations are. So next time, next time they get attacked, the Enterprise decides they're going to be ready, and they get about 48 hours respite. And in that time, Malcolm builds 2 more phase cannons. And so, Malcolm and Trip, they succeed in building 2 phase cannons. And so they go out, they find an asteroid and conduct some more test firing. So Captain Archer says, all right, shave a few meters off that mountaintop there on that asteroid. So he says, yes, sir. And he goes ahead, he fires the phase cannons. And this is basically the result. He obliterates the entire section of that asteroid. Unfortunately, what that does is there's an overload in the system, and it blows out systems all over the Enterprise. But they did blow up a mountain basically on this asteroid. So, but thus we have the first recorded, chronologically speaking, the first recorded overloaded weapon firing in Star Trek or Star Trek-like universes. So, in Starfleet Battle,
right?
What was that?
You could just hear the sense of enthusiasm in the Starfleet Battle player's voice about the idea.
I know. I was being sarcastic about it. This was the only time this ever happened. No.
Wait a minute. Was Delon a Starfleet Battles player?
No. I meant you.
Okay. Gotcha.
How excited you were about the idea of overloading a weapon.
So obviously the first overload doesn't really go well. Like I said, it blows out systems all over the Enterprise, and then they got to go back and get the ship fixed as they continue on their way back to Earth. However, after a little while, they get some things repaired, and then they encounter that alien ship again. And it starts approaching Enterprise. And of course, what Enterprise has taught them in the previous 3 engagements that the aliens won and Enterprise lost was they really had nothing to fear from Enterprise. There was Enterprise just had no weapons to be concerned about or tactical capabilities. So they encounter the ship, and Malcolm is ordered to fire at the ship as it approaches. And, they fixed all their damage from the overload. They fire the phaser cannons, and really nothing happens. The shields the alien ship shields absorb the damage, absorb the hit. And so once again, the aliens have proven, they've just taken Enterprise's best shot, and they can be even more confident now as they approach the Enterprise that Enterprise has completely inadequate weaponry. And so they continue to just casually close in on the Enterprise. They probably figure at this point they can do whatever they need with the Enterprise, strip it for parts, whatever. So why destroy something that they can sell? So my impression here is that there are lots of pirate species or marauding bands or species out there just preying on, individual ships out in space these days. So, but this time, of course, Captain Archer, he says, what happened? You blew the whole mountain away last time you shot it. And Malcolm explains, yeah, but we had an overload, it overloaded the systems and blew out systems all over the ship. And Archer's like, well, right about now, that sounds pretty good because we didn't really do anything to these aliens. So he says, do it again. And Trip figures out a way to fire him in that overloaded stage configuration without necessarily wiping the ship out and all its systems. So having no effect on the enemy, they decide to fire again. Now, so they make a few adjustments, and of course the aliens still just kind of closing in at a nice casual speed because really what do they have to worry about? can't really blame them for being overconfident. And so they finally get the phase cannons ready, and they fire again. And this time, they completely knock out the enemy shields and do some damage. And then Archer fires some spatial torpedoes at the unshielded enemy ship and damage it. And basically, and finally they win their first out of 5 engagements, basically at this point. So now that Enterprise is a badass warship, they decide to not go back to Earth and continue exploring. They can clearly build their own weapons out in space and, suck at Jupiter Station. So they decide to resume exploring without interruption.
Did it bother you at all that they could just go and build phaser cannon if they just put their mind to it?
Yeah, at that point, I'm not sure why I would stop building phase cannons to put on the ship.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? I would just think the ship would end up bristling with phase cannons.
Power considerations, structural problems.
Oh, but you can always just reroute power. I mean, Pat's an old Starfleet Battles player. Power all your weapons.
But then there is a limited amount of power to fire all those weapons. And even Starfleet Battles did have a thing, I think they referred to it as shock, where, you can't have too many weapons firing down a single bearing and stuff like that. It's no bueno. There is a
bunch of them though, so that if you take damage, it's like we don't have to fix that damage. We just got another one.
Yeah. You can have some redundancy that way.
What you want, we'll make more.
Sounds like Delon was trying to say something.
Well, there's a couple of things about these 2 episodes that has always bothered me. And when you were talking with Chris earlier, you kind of confirmed some of the sequence. The first episode you were talking about was episode number 2.
Yes.
This one is like the 12th in the first season, correct?
Yes, it's episode 12.
So my question, and this is something I thought to myself when I was watching the show originally back in the early 2000s, what the hell happened in the 10+ episodes between them? Like they almost forgot after the first one. We got our asses kicked here. Why don't we build this thing? Right? No, they wait until they get their asses kicked again. And
well, it wasn't until Archer said, "Yeah, we're going back to Earth. We can't hack it out here." Right? That's where they finally got mad enough to, because I think they were all in that naive, drinking the Kool-Aid. Hey, we're just out here exploring, since we're nice, we don't mean harm to anybody. I'm sure everyone will be nice to us. Right. So they had very much drank the Kool-Aid.
Well, I kind of consider that as idealistic and not necessarily at all practical.
Correct. There's nothing practical or pragmatic about their attitude early on in the show.
There's a lot of things.
And it's labeled as cynicism in season 4, right? It's not that, oh yeah, you learn valuable lessons out there. It's, oh, now you're cynical. So, but to make it the happiest possible ending, of course, while the ship was being hunted all this time, while the Enterprise was being hunted by an alien ship all this time, most of the command crew was, their primary priority at that point was doing vital research on Malcolm's favorite foods and stuff. So that way they could have a birthday cake for him at the end of all of this. So that is a pretty happy ending when you get a birthday cake. I think it might be is it the only birthday cake we've seen in the Star Trek franchise? I'm not sure, but I think it might be.
There was something they were doing something with a cake.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, someone made it.
It looked like it was phosphorescent. So.
Yeah. Someone made a cake out of Data, as I recall, as well, in one of those creepy nightmare episodes. But I don't, that's a creepy cake, not a birthday cake. So at the end of these 2 episodes, the score is pretty much Enterprise 1, Strange Aliens 4, if we go by each individual encounter. So I don't count the first battle as a win, like I said, since it's the Axanar that came in and saved the Enterprise. In this season or this battle number 2, Enterprise basically lost the first 3 encounters with the silent enemy before finally scoring some real hits. So here's one thing about these encounters. These encounters that Enterprise gets this is like when you're playing Stellaris or one of those other, space empire building type games, where early on, you've got this inadequate fleet with crappy ships, and pirates remain a big threat to your budding space empire and stuff like that. So that's clearly the stage of the game that Earth is in at this point in Star Trek. They are in that vulnerable stage. So, all right. So that pretty much concludes the battles. The first two battles for Enterprise in the first season. Over the coming weeks, we'll go through some additional battles, and some of them get a little more interesting. Enterprise, had a tendency to, season 3, we've got several battles with the Xindi. There's a battle between the Vulcans and the Andorians where the Enterprise decides to get in the middle of the rumble, and I don't believe that it fares very well. So anyways, throughout the series, there'll be several other tactical engagements and stuff like that. And then, we get Malcolm, ever the military guy. He's the one that comes up with the tactical alert and all that kind of stuff for the ship. And again, he's not seen as practical, right? He's seen as being alarmist or something like that. So, that's their general attitude until they realize, maybe he's on to something, because like Archer said, you're going to need a lot of those weapons.
Yep.
So, and this would also probably explain why the Explorer starships, another reason the Explorer starships always get bigger and more powerful. Because, you want them faster, you want to be able to be out there longer, but hey, if you can carry that much more weaponry around, probably not a bad idea. I mean, if you look at the amount of phaser power that a Galaxy class can throw out with their, that gigantic phaser strip. I mean,
well, there was that one episode where they lost their memory, and they said, well, clearly looking at the ship, this is a battleship. It has
this is a battleship. That's exactly right. And in yesterday's Enterprise, it's identified as a battleship also.
It had extra gear in yesterday's Enterprise, so it didn't have a couple of extra things there.
Seemed like they had more people too.
I got the impression, they talked about it being able to carry 5,000 troops. So the way I interpret that is, in the Prime universe, they could carry 5,000 family members. Evacuation, they could evacuate a small colony or something like that. So,
I thought I remembered that they made changes to the model.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't recall changes to the model. I'd have to go back and reread.
I could be wrong on that.
Reread bits and minutia.
I'd also throw in there that if you took the original Prime Enterprise D and took all of those spacious, gigantic quarters that are larger than most houses are today, and made them barracks with stacks and stacks of bunks, you could fit a hell of a lot more people into that show.
True. Now, I fully believe you could fit many more people. Life support just becomes the issue. And we don't know. I don't believe we have any idea what the limiting number of the life support limit on the number of people and passengers there are. I know that in some cases they talk about, there's a crew and an evacuation capacity or something like that. If you had to cram a bunch of people on board, how many people could the life support sustain? And it's frequently in the thousands. So, but you know what? I mean, on an aircraft carrier, we got 5,000-6,000 people on those things.
Yeah, you could fit 6,000 on, and
I gotta believe they could generate the oxygen, and their recycling capability allows them to keep a lot of people fed.
And they don't need to do it forever, right?
Right.
Be a reasonably short period of time.
I remember at one point in time in one of the DS9 episodes where O'Brien is talking about not only them having a backup, but a secondary backup. So if that's the kind of over-engineering they're going to do, I'm pretty sure the Enterprise D could probably handle 3, 4, maybe 5 times the number of people that they normally carry, just because they over-engineered it to the point of an extreme.
I'm probably the case. I mean,
and
it's so not about space.
And with Enterprise Enterprise D, they're never very clear. They talk about, hey, there's 1,000 people aboard. I think they just misspeak sometimes, and they're talking about the number of crew. And then because if they have families aboard and there's still only a total of 1,000 people, then your main crew is very, very small, because if you've got enough people to have classrooms at different grade levels, then that represents, and they had quite a number of children. And then that represents 2 parents on board for each of those kids for the most part. And so suddenly you have a very small command crew, or you have a very small ship crew, and lots of civilians on board, if it's only 1,000 people on board. So I've chosen, at least in my own headcanon, to believe that the crew is 1,000 plus however many family members there are, which is probably a couple thousand more people, or several thousand, some number that's greater than 1,000. But that's not confirmed by anything that I'm aware of.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So, but in Enterprise, they're a long way from having family members aboard. So, in this particular case, they have a crew of 83 people and 1 Beagle. And that is their crew: 1 Vulcan, 1 Denobulan, 81 humans.
And whatever the hell Phlox has in sickbay.
And plus all those weird creatures in sickbay. That's right. So, but I like that. It still adds, one of the things I liked about Enterprise, I found their characters to be far more relatable than, some of the people that only look like humans, in later in the series.
Yeah, I really like, I sort of bounced off of Enterprise the first time, but when I sort of rediscovered it, it was a lot better than I remembered, and I actually enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah,
episodes here and there I haven't seen, but
sure.
But by and large, I really like Enterprise.
Yeah, I do too. So I'm looking forward to going back and rewatching a bunch of them to do the research for this. But it should be fun
to do that too. The one thing I don't like about Enterprise though is there's a couple places where they felt compelled to explain stuff. Like I didn't really need to see the forehead ridges explanation, for instance.
Oh, you're talking about the Klingon thing in season 4?
Season 4 with the augments. But
then again, I always thought, the entire forehead ridges thing is sort of a bugaboo of mine to begin with. I think I understand why they thought they had to do it for more troubles, but even so, I think it's problematic.
I would agree with you, I agree with you from that standpoint. The idea of the Klingons wanting augments after discovering what had happened with the augments in the first part of that season, it makes perfect sense that they would want to do that. Now, throwing in that whole, ridge thing, maybe that was kind of a bone they threw back to answer the question of Worf saying it was a private thing and we don't discuss it.
Which I think was a horrible answer.
But so perhaps it was a horrible answer, but what was a better answer?
The better answer is, in the 1960s, Star Trek had a much smaller budget.
Yeah, no, but it's got to be an in-universe answer.
No, I mean, some of the dumbest things that Gene Roddenberry ever said were in-universe answers, because Gene Roddenberry wouldn't give a straight-up answer on stuff. He'd just flippantly invent some stupid-ass shit, and it would end up causing problems for people that actually tried to make things work later. Like when he was asked the question of like, why are the star dates out of order? Rather than just simply saying they show the episodes out of order, he had to invent this complicated explanation involving position in the universe and how fast the ship is going, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, they're out of order because it's a damn TV show.
We could have also said that the writers never got their act together and compared notes.
No, but they filmed them in order. The star dates are in order when they filmed them.
They were? Okay.
Yeah, the star dates were in order when they filmed them. It's just NBC just decided to show stuff out of order. And so like the first episode we saw after the second pilot was, if I remember correctly, Man Trap, which is the salt creature, which was actually like the 6th episode film. Or maybe I've got that backwards. I think it might have been the first episode film and it was the 6th one we saw. And so that's why occasionally you see things where like they had that right and then it got wrong later on. Well, no, it took them a while to sort of figure out what they were doing with some stuff, and they had it wrong and then they got it right, and then they changed the episodes so that you see them out of order. So I've never liked the fact that Roddenberry felt compelled to just like give flippant answers on stuff. And I never liked the forehead ridges explanation. For me, the right answer is that it's a TV show, right? I was perfectly fine with the answer that it was a TV show and just go back and pretend that they always had ridges. So, but I won't. So let's see. We're getting close, aren't we? Oh, yeah, we just got a couple of minutes.
Yep, we're pretty much at time. So I think that this is probably... Go ahead. Go ahead, Delon.
I will throw in one comment.
Go for it.
It goes back to the picture you were showing earlier with the birthday cake.
Yeah.
If Chef was the best one in the entire Starfleet, and they had to recruit him and whatnot to bring him out to there, I don't believe for 1 second he'd make a cake looking that crappy. That looked like something that was done by an 8th grader in a home economics class.
You're not wrong. It could be that Hoshi made the cake.
That is entirely possible.
Because she talked about cooking in her quarters earlier in that one, which Malcolm mistook to mean that she was asking him on a date, and then, insert awkward moment for people.
Yes, they never explained where the cake came from, but I'm looking at this going, okay, I'm pretty sure Chef either was having a really bad day or somebody else did it.
Well, you know what? He was probably manning a battle station throughout all of this and didn't have time to work on the stupid cake.
The cake is baking. That's not cooking. So if he's no, I mean, I'm serious when I say that, because I've made the mistake of implying to people that baking and cooking are the same thing, and I've been corrected by both cooks and cookers.
Right. Right, but if he's a one-man operation, and they always seem to indicate that he always was a one-man operation, then he would have to know how to do both.
Yeah, and you'd think that somebody else in the ship would know. I mean, they've got to have some mess cranks and stuff too.
Oh yeah, they'd have to. Well, you've got one person who's the steward, Daniels, and Chef, and that seems to be the entire culinary staff.
Yep.
All right, I think we're done.
I think so too. All right, guys. Well, hey, it was a pleasure, everybody. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe and share the channel information with your friends. So hopefully we can keep growing things and keep things going. So thanks, everybody, for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week.
A lot of fun, guys.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. Bye.